Montana Territory, September 1882. The wind cut sharp through the cottonwoods lining the banks of the Musselshell River as Lucia Norwood crumpled the letter in her trembling hands and pressed it tight to her chest. She sat on the edge of an old wooden wagon, parked beside the half-built schoolhouse she had traveled over 1,000 miles to teach in. Her cheeks were red from the cold, her eyes redder from crying. The letter was from Caleb, her fiancé, or rather, her former fiancé. He had married someone else back in Pennsylvania. Someone more fitting, he wrote. Lucia had read it twice, then again and again, as if the words might change, but they stayed the same. Final, cold. She did not notice the rider until the hooves kicked up dust and pine needles near her boots. "You all right, ma'am?" came a voice low, with that slow drawl that only real cowboys carried. Lucia looked up and blinked against the setting sun. The man on the horse squinted down at her, one hand resting on the pommel, the other holding his hat against the wind. He was young, maybe mid-20s, but his face carried the kind of tired only hard years could carve. His coat was dusted with trail dirt, his boots worn but well kept. "Ah, yes," Lucia said, even though her hands were still shaking. "You do not look it." He swung down from the saddle, tall and broad-shouldered, his voice unhurried. "That letter make you cry like that?" She gritted her teeth, embarrassed, and turned her face away. "It is none of your business." "No, ma'am, it is not. But I hate to see someone hurting and act like I do not." Lucia looked back at him. He stood with his hat in hand now, his dark brown hair tousled by the wind, eyes the color of green pine needles, soft with concern. "My name is Isaiah Kessler. I run cattle near the southern ridge." Lucia studied him, then let out a breath. "Lucia Norwood, I am the new schoolteacher, or I was supposed to be." Isaiah tilted his head. "Supposed to be? They have not finished the schoolhouse. Nobody came to greet me. I have no place to stay." "And now this," she said, holding up the crumpled letter. "The man I was going to marry just told me he married someone else." Isaiah's jaw tightened a little. "That is low." Lucia stood and brushed her skirt, fingers still clenched around the letter. "I came all this way for a new start. I thought maybe he would follow, and now I have nothing." Isaiah looked at her a moment longer, then reached for his saddlebag. "Then let me offer something small." He pulled out a folded piece of paper and a graphite pencil and knelt beside the wagon wheel. He leaned the paper against the wood, his brow furrowed in focus. Lucia blinked. "What are you doing?" He looked up, just a little smile in his eyes. "Writing you a new letter. You do not even know me. That fella made you cry. I would rather write you a letter every day than see that again." Lucia's breath caught. "You cannot mean that." Isaiah stood and held out the paper. "I do. Every day. One for each day you are here. Until you do not feel forgotten anymore." Lucia stared at the paper, then reached for it, her fingers brushing his. He was warm, solid, real. She read the note's simple words but kind. It said she was brave, that she had come farther than most men ever dared, that she deserved better than someone who would leave her behind. Her eyes filled again, but this time it was not from hurt. "Thank you," he nodded, quiet. "You can stay at the bunkhouse nearby if you do not mind ranch hands. It is not fancy, but it is warm." Lucia hesitated. "Would that be proper?" Isaiah's cheeks colored. "You would have your own room, door with a lock. I will vouch for you. Folks around here trust me." She glanced at the fading sun, the empty schoolhouse, the cold creeping into her bones. Then she nodded. "All right." He helped her gather her trunk and set it onto his horse, walking beside it while she walked beside him. They did not talk much, but it was not uncomfortable. The air between them settled calm. The wind softened. And when they reached the bunkhouse, Isaiah lit the lanterns and showed her the small room in back, with a narrow bed and a window facing east. "Sunrise comes early," he said as he set her trunk down, "but it is worth waking up for." Lucia smiled just a little. "I could use something worth waking up for." Isaiah held her gaze a moment, then tipped his head. "I will bring you tomorrow's letter after breakfast." Lucia closed the door behind him and leaned against it, heart thudding strange in her chest. She unfolded the letter again and ran her fingers over the words, ink still fresh. It was not a grand thing, but it felt like the beginning of something honest, and she had not felt that in a long time. Outside, the wind had quieted. Inside, her hands had stopped shaking. Isaiah went to bed that night thinking about the schoolteacher with fire in her eyes and sorrow in her hands, and what it would take to make her smile like that every day. He figured he had time and letters enough to try. Lucia folded her shawl tighter around her arms as she stepped onto the porch of the bunkhouse, blinking into the pale morning light. The air smelled of frost and wood smoke, and far off, a lone hawk circled above the ridge. She hadn't slept much, but her mind felt clearer than it had in days. Isaiah was already there, leaning against the hitch rail, a tin mug steaming in his hand. His coat was dusted with wood shavings, and a fresh scrape along the back of his knuckle suggested early morning work. He didn't speak at first, just offered her a quiet nod and reached into his coat pocket. "This one's shorter," he said, holding out the paper, "but it's still yours." Lucia hesitated before taking it. The edges were smudged, the writing careful. She didn't read it yet, just tucked it into her skirt pocket with a nod of thanks. "You always start your days like this?" she asked, glancing at his hand. "Usually earlier, mending fence today. Old cedar posts don't hold forever." She stepped down onto the hard, packed earth. "Do you enjoy the work?" Isaiah looked toward the tree line before answering. "It's honest. You put something in, something stays standing. Not many things in life do." Lucia followed his gaze. The cottonwoods had dropped half their leaves overnight, scattering gold across the ground. "I taught in Virginia before coming west, for children of mill workers. Their fathers drank. Their mothers stitched until their hands bled. I tried to teach them poetry. It never stuck." Isaiah turned to her, brow drawn. "Maybe it did. Maybe they just didn't know it yet." She smiled, brief and tired. "You're kinder than I expected from someone who wears spurs." He shrugged. "Spurs don't say much about a man." Lucia walked beside him as he led his horse to the trough. She watched him work the pump handle, the water gurgling up slow and cold. "You write other things or just letters to school teachers?" she asked. His mouth pulled into a quiet grin. "Never wrote a letter before yesterday." That surprised her. "Then why promise one every day?" He let the bucket fill before answering. "Because I saw a woman sitting alone with her hands shaking. And I figured she might need to hear that not everyone leaves." Lucia didn't speak for a moment, just watched the water slosh as the horse drank. Then, softly, she said, "I never asked him to follow me. I just hoped." Isaiah rested his hand on the horse's neck. "Hope's not a weakness." She looked at him, something unreadable in her eyes. "It feels like one." He shook his head. "It's what keeps most men alive through a Montana winter." She laughed then, not loud, but it came from somewhere deeper. The sound startled a crow from a nearby fence post, and they both watched it fly off. After a moment, she reached into her pocket and unfolded the letter. Her eyes moved across the page slowly. Then she looked up. "You spelled courage wrong." Isaiah looked sheepish. "I'll fix it in tomorrow's." "Don't," she said, folding it again. It made it feel real. He nodded once, then turned toward the pasture. "You're welcome to ride out sometime. If you want to see more than just the walls of that half-built schoolhouse." "I haven't ridden since I was 12, she said. "Then you're due." She hesitated, then met his gaze. "I'd like that." Isaiah nodded again, then walked the horse toward the barn. Lucia stood there a while longer. the letter in her hand catching the morning sun. The wind had picked up again, but this time it didn't feel quite so cold. The saddle creaked under Lucia as she eased the old mare into a slow walk, Isaiah riding quietly beside her. The trail west of the homestead wound through dry grass and sagebrush, the earth packed hard from late summer sun. Lucia kept her hands steady on the reins, her posture stiff with inexperience, but she didn't ask for help. Isaiah hadn't offered any either. He just rode near enough to catch her if she slipped. "I thought it would be harder," she murmured, watching the mare's ears flick forward. Isaiah glanced over. "It will be once we hit the rise." Lucia's brow lifted. "You didn't mention that. You didn't ask," she huffed, though it wasn't quite irritation. "So you only give answers when prompted," means less wasted words. The trail narrowed near a patch of chokecherry bushes, their fruit shriveled on the branch. Isaiah slowed his horse and let her pass first. The incline began just beyond, a worn slope cut by hooves and runoff. Lucia leaned forward instinctively. Her legs ached already, but she didn't say so. Halfway up, she asked, "Did you grow up here?" "Dakota Territory. East of Yankton." "My folks came west after the war," he paused. "Too many ghosts back there." Lucia nodded, not pressing further. "You," he asked, "north of Richmond." "My father ran a printing press. He wanted me to marry a banker." "Did you?" "No." "Good." Lucia looked at him sharply. He kept his eyes on the trail. "A man who counts coins all day wouldn't think to write a letter just to see you smile." Her chest tightened, but she said nothing. The slope flattened as they reached a low ridge. Below, the land opened wide, gentle hills stitched with creeks, cottonwoods running like seams through the folds. In the distance, cattle moved slow and dark across the pasture. Lucia exhaled, barely aware she'd been holding her breath. "I didn't realize it could look like this," she said. Isaiah leaned forward to rest his forearms on the horn. "First time I saw it, I thought I'd stumbled into a painting." "Do you come here often?" "Only when I need reminding." Lucia turned back to the view. "Of what?" He didn't answer right away. "Then, that there's still good in the bones of this place." Lucia closed her eyes against a sudden pull behind her ribs. For a long time, neither spoke. The wind lifted her hair, carried the scent of dust and dry grass. When she opened her eyes again, Isaiah was holding something out to her, a folded paper, worn at the creases. "You forgot yesterday's," he said. She took it, fingers brushing his. "You're one ahead now." "I had time to think." She unfolded it there on the ridge. His handwriting was small, careful. The words were less like a note, and more like a story about a boy who once tried to mend a fence in a thunderstorm, and the lightning that cracked a tree not 20 feet away. He'd written about the sound, how it shook his ribs, and how his father had said afterward that some lessons only come loud. Lucia folded the letter slowly. "Do you write them all in the morning?" "No, some come during the night." She slipped it into the inside pocket of her coat. "You're not what I thought you'd be." Isaiah's eyes lingered on her face. "Neither are you." Her cheeks flushed, but she didn't look away. A hawk passed overhead, its shadow gliding over them both. Isaiah shifted in the saddle. "You want to head back?" "Not yet," she said. They sat there a while longer in the hush that only wide land can hold. When they did turn for home, Lucia rode lighter in the saddle, her hands looser on the reins. Isaiah stayed beside her, never needing to lead, only matching her pace. The first frost came overnight, laying a silver hush across the grass behind the bunkhouse. Lucia stood barefoot on the plank floor of her small room, steam rising from the wash basin as she wrung out a cloth and pressed it to her face. Her breath fogged the window pane, and beyond it, the pasture glowed soft with morning light. She pulled on her boots, wincing a little as the leather met the sore spots on her ankles. The ride with Isaiah had left her aching in places she hadn't known could ache. But it had also left her quieter inside, the kind of quiet that settles low and deep. When she stepped outside, Isaiah was lifting a crate of tools onto the back of a wagon. His coat was unbuttoned, shirt sleeves rolled to the elbow, and a fresh scrape ran along his forearm. He didn't look up right away. "You're favoring your left foot," he said. "I'm not," she replied, then paused. "Yes, I am." He gave her a sideways glance. "You should rest it." "I've done enough resting. I want to see the schoolhouse again." He brushed the dirt from his hands. "I was headed that way to check the roof pitch. You can ride along if you trust my driving." Lucia climbed up beside him without answering. The wagon jolted as he snapped the reins, and they rolled through the pale light in silence for a while, the frost crackling beneath the wheels. She watched the fields pass. "What made you stay here after your folks came west?" Isaiah kept his eyes ahead. "I tried leaving once. Went south to Cheyenne with a trail crew, didn't like the noise, didn't like the way the wind carried nothing but dust." "Sounds like you missed home." He nodded. "Some places hold your shape better than others." The schoolhouse came into view, its frame still skeletal against the sky. A ladder leaned against the side, and a pile of cedar shingles waited nearby. Lucia stepped down carefully, testing her weight. "Will it be finished before the snow if we work fast?" He handed her a hammer. "You ever drive nails, only into lathe boards for paper displays? Same idea, just less forgiving." They worked without much talk. Her hands blistered early, but she didn't complain. Isaiah showed her how to hold the shingle at an angle, how to feel when the nail met solid grain. The rhythm settled between them: lift, place, strike. A hawk called far off, and the wind carried the scent of pine pitch and raw wood. By midday, Lucia sat on a beam with her boots dangling, cheeks flushed from the cold. Isaiah handed her a tin cup of water and sat beside her. "You've got grit," he said, wiping sawdust from his brow. "I'm not sure that's a compliment." "It is around here." She tilted her head. "You don't speak like most men I've met." "I was raised by a man who only spoke when he meant it." Lucia swirled the water in her cup. "What happened to him?" "Fell through the ice 2 winters ago. Out checking fence just after sunrise. Horse made it back." "He didn't?" She didn't answer right away. "Then, that's how my mother went. Scarlet fever. I was 13. She was there, then she wasn't." Isaiah turned toward her, his expression unreadable. "You stayed strong." "No," she said. "I just kept moving." He nodded, as if he understood the difference. They sat that way until the sun shifted lower, throwing long shadows across the prairie. Isaiah pulled a folded paper from his coat and handed it to her without ceremony. She opened it slowly, reading the lines without speaking. It was about fences, how some were meant to hold cattle, and others were built just to keep the wind from getting too close to the door. He'd written that sometimes a man didn't know which kind he was building until it was too late. Lucia looked up. "You don't strike me as someone who hides from the wind." "I don't," he said, "but I've learned not to leave doors open either." She folded the letter with care. "Well, maybe I'll build one that opens on purpose." Isaiah gave a quiet laugh, soft and surprised. "Let me know if you need help with the hinges." They finished the afternoon nailing shingles in silence, but it was a silence that felt full, not empty. As they packed the tools and loaded the wagon, Lucia felt the ache in her hands settle into something steadier. That night, she laid the letter beside the others in a wooden box she kept under her cot. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. The room was warm, the wind was quiet, and tomorrow would come with another letter. Another step forward. Another hinge. The schoolhouse was finished by mid-October, its cedar roof darkened by early rain and its windows set deep into thick framed walls. Lucia swept sawdust and wood shavings from the floor that morning, her skirts tucked up to her knees. palms calloused from weeks of hammering and hauling. She didn't mind the ache, it was the kind that came from something earned. Outside, Isaiah was hitching the wagon to haul in benches made by hand from pine slabs. He moved with quiet efficiency, the kind of rhythm that came from knowing every step before it was needed. When the last bench was set in place, he stood in the doorway and watched her for a long moment. "You thought about what you'll teach first?" he asked. Lucia looked up from a crate of slates. "I have, but it depends on who shows up." "They'll come," he said. Word spread. She nodded, then walked toward him, brushing sawdust from her sleeves. "I'm expecting children who haven't read anything beyond a Bible verse or cattle brand. I'll have to find where they are before I can bring them further." "You will." Lucia tilted her head. "You always so sure of people." "No," Isaiah said, "but I've seen what you've done here. No sense doubting a woman who builds her own classroom." She smiled, but it faded into something more thoughtful. "I had a letter yesterday from the board in Helena. They're offering me a permanent position starting in the spring, full salary, a house." Isaiah was still, his mouth set in a quiet line. "That's good." "It is." He nodded once, then turned his gaze to the field beyond the window. "Do you want it?" Lucia didn't answer at first. She stepped past him and out onto the porch, the wind tugging at the edge of her shawl. The cottonwoods were bare now, their leaves long fallen and crushed into the earth. She could smell snow in the air. "I don't know," she said. "I came here thinking I needed to prove something. That I could make a life alone, on my own terms." Isaiah joined her, the boards creaking beneath his boots. "And now I've got boxes full of letters, hands that know how to swing a hammer, and someone who hasn't missed a day at my side since I arrived." Isaiah looked down at her, the distance between them quiet and close. "I don't have much to offer, Lucia. Just a stretch of land, a roof that leaks in 2 corners, and a mule that's more stubborn than he's worth." She turned to him, her voice steady. "You gave me a place when I had none. You saw me when I was falling apart. And you never once asked for anything back. You never owed me anything. That doesn't mean I don't want to stay." Isaiah's jaw tensed, but his eyes softened. "You sure?" "I am." He took a step closer. "Then I'd like to ask you to stay for good, not as a guest, not just for winter. I want to build something with you, Lucia, not just fences and schoolhouses." Her hand reached for his, fingers threading through his calloused ones. "Then build it with me." Isaiah leaned down, slow and certain, and kissed her like a man who'd waited long enough. Her hand came to rest against his chest, and for the first time in months, she felt not just safe but wanted. The wind caught the open door behind them, and it swung wide on its new hinges. They married in December, with frost clinging to the windows, and the scent of pine boughs hung over the door. The children came the following week, bundled in coats too thin and boots too big, but wide-eyed and ready. Lucia taught them to hold a pencil properly, to speak their letters clear and proud. Isaiah built a woodshed and mended the leaking roof, and came every Friday to drop off firewood and kiss his wife at the door. By spring, Lucia had written to Helena and turned down the offer. By summer, they'd planted a garden behind the house and added a new room for the child they both hoped would come soon. Isaiah still wrote her letters. Not every day, but when the words pressed too hard in his chest and needed somewhere to land. She kept them all in a wooden box beneath their bed. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the cottonwoods and the porch held the last of the day's warmth, Lucia leaned against Isaiah's shoulder and watched the sky burn gold. "I never thought I'd find this," she said. He kissed her temple. "You didn't find it, Lucia. You built it." And she had. From broken pieces and long days and the quiet strength of a man who walked beside her, never ahead. The wind carried no sorrow now, only the hush of a home holding steady. And in that hush, They grew old together, steady and full of love.